What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another video. The first episode of season 8 of the Contender Series just finished up, and let's go ahead and recap the 5 fights that just went down. Now, we ended up going 4-1 on picks, including the only underdog to win in this episode. So let's go over our success. Let's go over what happened in the fights as well. Make sure to hit that like button. Drop a comment down below on your thoughts on the event, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. First up was Lonnie Kavanagh against Antoine Ho, and this one ended before it even got started. I think Kavanagh ended up getting his KO in the first 2 minutes of this fight. So my breakdown for this one was I thought that Kavanagh was just going to be a little more calm, patient, and find his shots a little bit better. I thought he was the better overall fighter, and it really did show early in this fight, even though it only lasted like 2 minutes. He came in, both of them went for a left hook at the same time, but Kavanagh timed it so well that when Antoine Ho's was a little more looping, Kavanagh did like a half uppercut, like diagonal uppercut that kind of landed right on the chin of Antoine Ho and put him to sleep. We also mentioned that both of these guys have real power at 125 pounds, which isn't always the case because it's such a lightweight class, but boy did Kavanagh display that power in this fight. I did mention in the video, I believe Antoine Ho is UFC ready. I said that I didn't think this was his opportunity to get, well, it was an opportunity, but I didn't think this was his time to get into the UFC. I think we will see him in the future, but regardless, Kavanagh with an explosive start to season 8 of the Contender Series gets the first round KO, and that was our first win of the night. We had Kavanagh in that matchup. Next up was Jose Delgado against Ernie Juarez, and what we mentioned in this fight was that Delgado's striking was amazing. He has fantastic combinations. He's a very technical striker, and he throws anything he possibly can and mixes up all of his strikes to keep his opponent guessing. That's exactly what he did in this fight. He took this fight on 11 days notice, and he came in to scrap. We mentioned he was a dog as well, and Juarez was landing some good shots on Delgado in that second round, but basically the pressure of Delgado eventually wore on Juarez, and then Delgado just found that timing. He mentioned that he knew that Juarez was a kind of fighter to shoot for takedowns often in his fights, and he timed a beautiful knee on one of Juarez's entries when Delgado was backed up on the cage and put him to sleep. The referee didn't see that he was knocked out off that initial knee, so Delgado landed some extra shots in for good measure. But ultimately, what a fantastic display of his striking abilities on the Delgado end. We ended up going with Delgado. He was a huge favorite regardless of the 11 days notice, but he was clearly the better fighter in this matchup, and that pressure really got to Juarez. Not only was his striking on display, the fact that he mixed in some takedowns and wore on Juarez with that as well, that is really what caused that knockout to come to fruition because of how exhausted and tired Juarez was leading up to that KO. So that was a great performance, minus a few lapses on the feet that caused Juarez to land some big shots on Delgado. Delgado had a beautiful fight, beautiful performance on that end, and we go 2-0 to start the night. Next up was Bruno Lopes, a returning alum to Dana White's Contender Series, going up against Sazhiniani. And Lopes gets the second round TKO after breaking Sazhiniani in that second round. That first round was a little bit concerning. We had Lopes in this match. I thought he was just going to be the better fighter overall. And even though he didn't really choose to wrestle or grapple at all, which even though he is a striker predominantly, he has mixed in that grappling in his fights, and I thought he might want to do that in this matchup, considering Sazhiniani has that power and the physicality to kind of get him in trouble, to get Lopes in trouble, that is, in their fights. And it really showed in that first round. Sazhiniani threw with 100% intent every time, which we mentioned in our breakdown as well, but that ultimately caused his defeat because he was throwing such heat for the first 5-6 minutes of that fight, and he just got super exhausted. Lopes recognized this, started piecing up the body of Sazhiniani, which eventually caused him to quit, and then he curled up against the fence, and Lopes TKO'd him standing. I am super happy that Lopes ended up getting in to the UFC tonight because he has a great story. He ended up falling short last season. He gets a second opportunity, and he did not squander it. In that first round was a little bit scary, though. Sazhiniani, with those big, looping, heavy shots, put Lopes on his ass. But looking back at the replays, it wasn't like it was a knockdown, but Lopes was still 100% in with his senses. He was more of a stumble, if anything. And I'm just happy he managed to come back, break Sazhiniani in that second round, and get that finish. We go 3-0 to start the night. Now, this pick here, we had Rami Hamed, 33 years of age, hasn't fought since December 2022, and a lot of people were saying that Meng Ding was the better striker, and when I saw the tapes, I disagreed. I thought Rami was going to be the better, more technical striker, and Meng Ding didn't really have a grappling game to kind of nullify the striking of Rami Hamed. Rami Hamed was the only underdog to win his fight on the Contender Series for this episode, and we had Hamed in this fight because of the reasons I just mentioned. And it really did show. In the first 2 rounds, Hamed was backing up, but he was showing his ability to stay at range, his good movement around lateral movement, I should say, and he was really just nullifying any danger that Meng Ding brought in that striking, in that boxing. The only thing that Meng Ding really did was clinch. When he did clinch up, he didn't really do much. He didn't fight for underhooks. He didn't go for any takedowns. He kind of just let Hamed hold double underhooks and just pushed him up against the cage and just held him there. If Hamed tried to escape, he kind of just went with him, and Meng Ding really just held him there for some reason. I'm not sure. He struggled a lot with the range of Hamed. That bouncy karate taekwondo-esque style of striking really got to Meng. He wasn't able to kind of close in on Rami Hamed's location in that fight. And you could see his frustration, his frustration, especially in that third round. He was like screaming unnecessary noises, waving on Hamed to come fight. But it's not, I understand this is the Contender Series, and this is why Rami Hamed didn't get a contract, was because he didn't show that urgency, that killer instinct, especially as a 33-year-old. We know that Dana doesn't really like the older contenders, and unless they do something special. And Hamed was he was okay with just getting the win, and that's not what Dana White's looking for on the Contender Series. And I don't blame him, especially at 33 years old. Hamed is injury prone, so if Hamed did something more, like if he wasn't really like bouncing around the outside, maybe trying to go for that finish a little bit more in that fight, maybe Dana would have swayed his decision. But neither of these guys really, they were kind of complacent with just letting this go the 15 minutes. Nobody really showed any urgency to get the fight finished, but I think the decision was correct, despite that point deduction, because Meng Ding sacked Rami Hamed like 4 or 5 times in that fight. I think Rami Hamed was the rightful winner in this matchup. We ended up getting that dog pick, and let's move on to the main event. Wes Schultz going up against Mansour Abdul-Malik. Now, in this breakdown, I did mention that Mansour did seem like the more physically imposing guy, and he was probably going to find success because of his strength, because of his physicality. So that's exactly what had happened in this fight. I had Wes Schultz because Mansour has 5 professional wins. He's finished all 5 of his opponents in that first round. So my worry was that if he didn't get Wes Schultz out of there in that first round, he was going to gas because of that inexperience in the later rounds. To my surprise, Mansour had the better cardio, was the fighter with the better cardio in this matchup. Wes Schultz, after that first round, was huffing and puffing way more. Mansour came out in that second round, looked fresh, was breathing through his nose still, and that was a big surprise to me. I shouldn't have doubted the cardio. We knew that he was the more physical fighter that was going to find success on the feet with his strength, with the takedowns. And Wes Schultz, even though he did get taken out in that second round, he did show signs of promise. He's an absolute dog. even though it's just I don't know if he was afraid of Abdul-Malik's or Malik's power, but he was kind of like, he wasn't throwing with any intent whatsoever. He was kind of just like throwing some shots out, giving Abdul some feelers. But boy, does he have a chin. The guy took multiple huge shots from Mansour in that first round. And in that second round, I was surprised. West came in and started putting the pressure on Mansour, and he was backing him up. He was landing shots of his own, and it's just extremely tough. Mansour is just an absolute beast. Schultz couldn't really get any of his own takedowns. Mansour was just the more physically imposing guy, and maybe I should have favored that side of it for this pick. I just couldn't trust the cardio that I hadn't seen in Mansour, and I knew Wes Schultz also had that jiu-jitsu threat, but he wasn't really able to apply much of it. The guy's still an absolute dog. I'm sure we're going to see him in the UFC in the future as well, but great win by Mansour. His post-fight interview with Lorosenko, it just seems like this guy is dialed in. He knows exactly what he needs to do to find success in the UFC. I'm glad that he got the win, even though we didn't get the pick right. He deserves that contract. The guy looks like a beast, and he can probably do some damage in this middleweight division for the UFC. So for the contract, it was Lonnie Kavanagh, Jose Delgado, Bruno Lopes. Rami Hamid did not get the contract, and Mansour Abdul-Malik got the contract. All of these guys are worthy of that contract. I'm hoping that behind closed doors, Dana White kind of gives Wes Schultz a contract, even though he got finished in that second round, only because if you guys watch that fight, these two fighters seemed like they were in two completely different weight classes. Mansour is a monster. He is a massive dude. And I don't know how, it just looked like he was a light heavyweight fighting a middleweight or fighting a welterweight even. It was insane, the size difference. The power difference was insane as well. But nevertheless, we go 4-1 for the first episode of the Contender Series. Not bad. We also hit some great bets. If you guys want to get like live updates on my bets and see, I will implement that into my videos when I get more confident with it. But I have a Twitter account. It's Limpy Bets, LIMPYYBETS. Make sure you follow that. I drop my bets on there typically during the event because I don't like to put, like, I like to bet on most of the fights, and I don't do them all pre-event. I kind of do them as the event rolls on, depending on how my previous bets do, how I'm feeling, what the fights are going, how I see the fighters when they're walking out, things like that. So make sure to follow my Twitter as well for the actual bets. We ended up making some good money today. So nevertheless, thank you guys so much for watching another video. I will see you guys in the next couple of days where we break down UFC 305. Thank you guys for watching.